Welcome to the Transformative Pathways Podcast with your host, Jason Doby. Join Jason as he explores the many ways to unlock personal growth, mindfulness, and spiritual transformation. So now, please welcome the host of Transformative Pathways, Jason Doby.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Jason Doby, founder of Transformative Pathways Life Coaching. Thank you so much for joining us today. Our topic for today's episode is Addiction to Awakening, Sobriety, Growth, and Spirituality, with our guest, Jeff McComb, who is joining us today from Guelph, Ontario. Jeff is a recovered addict and alcoholic, entrepreneur, and sponsor. He is also an old buddy of mine, as we used to work together in the kitchen way back in the day. Like many of us, he battled addiction for years, but after hitting rock bottom, he turned his life around and got clean. Now he's been sober for 9 years and dedicates his time to mentoring others in the 12-step recovery process through AA. Today, he owns and operates a successful landscaping business, a testament to how far he's come. But beyond his business success, his true passion is helping others break free from alcohol and reclaim their lives. Jeff, welcome to the show, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks for the great intro.
Yeah, man. Awesome. It's so great to have you.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome, man. So to start things off, Jeff, would you be able to tell us a little bit about your personal journey and how you were finally able to break free from addiction to drugs and alcohol?
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to tell you that. Do you want the long version or the short version?
Yeah, go with the long version. That's great.
So, what was the first part of that question? My journey with
your
addiction?
personal journey. Yeah, your personal journey. So your personal story. You start wherever you want, man.
Yeah. So, kind of a troubled childhood, which isn't all that uncommon. Broken home, also not all that uncommon. But early on, I felt different. There was just something inside of me that I didn't have the vocabulary as a child to articulate. But I knew that there was something different about me. I just felt all the other kids kind of had something that I didn't have, like I was missing something. And that continued on through my adolescent and early adulthood. I always felt kind of separate from everyone, even in crowds of people or in parties around family, everything. Like I always felt that I was alone, that I was isolated in some way, but couldn't quite put my finger on it to say like, hey, this is wrong with me, or maybe I would have reached out for help if I could have put my finger on that. It was just this kind of weird feeling that I always carried around with me. There was a point when I went to live with my uncle because things were pretty tumultuous at my house. And I was sitting there with him one day, and he said to me, "Jeff, why don't you have a glass of Irish cream?" He was sitting there drinking beer. He's like, "I think you'll like it." And I drank that glass of Irish cream. And not only did I like it, I loved it. It was the best thing that I had ever experienced in my life, and I ended up drinking the whole bottle. But that weird feeling that I was just telling you about, that kind of went away. It was just like, and I think I was 15 years old. And for the first time in my life, I kind of knew what it was like to be all those other kids that had that thing that I didn't have. Mm-hmm. And from that point on, I kind of knew what my life was missing, and it was booze. As long as I could get some booze in me, I could keep that weird feeling at bay. it worked. It was a great tool for me. It worked for a long time. I had a semi-successful relationship for a brief period of time. I became a part owner of a restaurant. I could get through the days as long as at some point I knew I was going to experience that thing that I experienced with the Irish cream, where that weird feeling that I've been carrying around with me my whole life was eased a little bit. And that began my journey with alcohol, which eventually rolled into drugs and alcohol. But it wasn't until a very dark moment in my life after kind of losing everything, that I realized I had to do something about it. And I can get more into that if you'd like.
Yeah.
So I don't know how detailed I want to get about the horror story, but basically, in a short period of time, I lost my girlfriend. My business partners kicked me out of the restaurant, so I lost my job. I pissed all my money away. I ended up on someone's couch, and everything just kind of fell in the matter of a couple weeks, like dominoes. My whole life just collapsed, and any normal person would have stopped drinking at that point. But what I did was I increased the dose, to search for that feeling that I was talking about earlier. And what happened was, this continued on for a while. Somehow I managed to get a job on a boat making a good amount of money, and I would get off the boat and I would just get into cocaine and alcohol, and it came a time when I was so badly mangled from the drugs and the alcohol that I couldn't get back on the boat, and I lost my job, and thankfully I had insurance with them. But at that point, I had this apartment, and I'd run out of rent money. I'd run out of food money. All my friends were pissed at me. All my family was pissed at me. And I thought the only way out was to kill myself. So there was a failed suicide attempt. Right after it failed, I kind of had this moment of clarity, where I said, I need to do something about this. And I called. There's a rehab in Guelph here, and I called the rehab, and they said, we can get you in 1 week. So I went to the rehab, and this is actually, I kind of yada-yada'd over some stuff, but this is the second time I'd be in this rehab. And there was a moment in there when I realized that there wasn't a person on this planet that could help me. There wasn't a drug. I realized that I wasn't able to help myself, and I was completely defeated. And they talk about rock bottom, and it wasn't so much that I had lost all of these physical things in my life. It was just this feeling of complete defeat, like I'm done. There's nothing I can do. And at that point, I'd been going to some AA meetings in the treatment center, and I heard these people talking about God and a solution and this and that, and I was pretty skeptical about it all. But I actually started praying at that point, because my plan when I got out of treatment was to try and kill myself again. And I knew that drunk, high, or sober, I wasn't going to survive. And I went into a washroom, and in that moment, I just gave every fiber of my being over to the universe, whatever I thought that was at the time. And when I got out of rehab, I somehow stayed sober that day. And I immediately started attributing that to something other than myself. And it was shortly after that I found a sponsor who quickly took me through the 12 steps. And I'd really like to discuss my experience with that because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of misconceptions about the 12 steps. And I would like to say that I'm not here to promote AA in any way. I'm just here to tell my story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an option for anyone that's out there who's struggling, right? And maybe the way I can explain my experience with AA might change their mind. But in no way am I being paid or anything to promote AA or anything like that.
Right.
So the greatest thing that I think I first got out of AA was the way they describe addiction in the 12 steps. And from that description, a light bulb went off in my mind. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the way the original 12 steps describes alcoholism. And this would apply to drug addiction as well. So they describe a craving as something completely different than we use the word craving in everyday life. So we've kind of taken that word and use it very lightly. You know, I'm craving potato chips. I'm craving chocolate. I could really crave watching a movie or something, right? But in AA, a craving is something very specific. A craving, as described by Alcoholics Anonymous, is a physical allergy. And I can only crave alcohol for 72 hours after my last drink. So I take a drink of booze, I get drunk. 72 hours later, it's impossible for me to crave alcohol.
Right.
What I'm left with is a mental obsession, which is the real bitch of alcoholism. But this made a lot of sense, and I'll give you an example. So the allergy, as it's described by AA, is wanting more. So like someone who's allergic to strawberries, they eat strawberries, they break out into hives, their neck swells, their throat swells or whatever. Well, what happens when I ingest alcohol and drugs is I break out into this thing called a craving. And I'm physically different. I was probably genetically predisposed to this. I break out into a craving and I want more. And at that point, it's virtually impossible for me to stop drinking at that point, lest, running out of money, passing out, getting locked up. Something in the outside world has to stop me from drinking at that point.
Right.
My intention could be to have 6 beers, but what happens after the second, I have no control over, because this physical allergy takes over. It's like being possessed. So once it goes in, I'm screwed. But 72 hours later, what I'm left with is a crazy mental obsession. So that mental obsession at the end of my drinking career looked a lot like this. I need a drink. I need a drink. I need a drink. Anything happened to me, I needed a drink. My shoes are untied. I need a fucking drink. Anything, right? I need a drink. I need a drink. But prior to that was like at the very end of my drinking career. Prior to that, the obsession looked a lot like this. And maybe there's some people that can more relate to this. This time, I'm going to control and enjoy my drinking. This time, I'm going to get a 6-pack or a half gram, and I'm really going to control it, and I'm really going to enjoy it, and I'm going to stop when that's done. Even though the past 1,000 times say that I cannot do that, I have this weird mental twist in my mind that says, this time it's going to be different. Right. And it tricks me 100% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So what I learned is that in AA is that I'm probably suffering and this is why, people get turned off by the whole God thing in AA. I'm not going there. They're like a cult, right? They're a weird God cult or whatever.
And that I kind of had that experience too. That kind of turned me off from it when I first quit.
Right. And actually last night we were talking about the difference between the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Right.
And unfortunately our fellowship has gotten very watered down over the past, however many years. We've gotten away from the program, but the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is this program that's practiced between me and a higher power, whatever you want to call that. Or you and a higher power. But the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous taught me was that I probably suffer from this thing called a spiritual disease or a spiritual malady. And what that looked like is that feeling that I talked about earlier when I was a kid. And I like to say that I was alcoholic or drug addict long before I took my first drink, because I felt this weird way, this indescribable way. And I can kind of elaborate on it now that I've experienced it, this spiritual sickness that I suffer from. And I've been this way for as long as I can remember. And it's kind of my baseline is spiritually sick. And for me, it looked like, I was frustrated. I was angry. I was pissed off. I missed the day of school when they taught everyone else how to live. I'm lost. I'm sad. I'm depressed. I'm fearful. I'm afraid of everything. I just can't get comfortable in my own skin. I've heard it described as always wanting to be somewhere else, as someone else, doing something else, with someone else. I was never okay right here, right now. I always, when I was standing up, I wanted to be sitting down. When I was sitting down, I wanted to be standing up. This is the spiritual sickness, right? I could never get comfortable inside myself. And to a certain extent, I still have that. I feel like this weird, awkward human. But that spiritual sickness was really bad when I was in active addiction. And what I didn't understand is that when I was using, I was treating addiction. You see, the biggest misunderstanding about addiction, according to the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, or the way society looks at it, maybe in the way as it differs from AA, is that alcohol and drugs are the problem. Alcohol and drugs were never my problem; they were my solution to this weird spiritual disease that I was suffering from. So what would happen was I would be feeling this way completely sober, and what would happen? All of that fear, all of that anxiety, all of that, uncomfortableness in my own skin, it would just wash away. And early on in my using and drinking, that feeling would last quite a long time, a few hours, whatever. But at the end, I might get 2 seconds of that, like, and then I would need another drink or another hit or whatever. But what I didn't understand is that I thought if I took the substance and I put it down and I never touched it again, that I would get better. Unfortunately, as soon as I take the substance and I put it down, my addiction gets worse, because the addiction is what we call in AA, it's what we call restless, irritable, and discontented-ism. That is addiction. Addiction is just being so uncomfortable all of the time that I'm constantly looking for something in the third dimension to change how I feel. So what I didn't realize the few times I tried to drink on my own was I would take the substance, my solution, and I would put it down and I would start to go absolutely bonkers, right? I would get angry. I would get frustrated. I would get pissed off. Something would make me restless, irritable, and discontented. And I always said, it's my boss, it's my friend, it's my girlfriend, it's something in the outside world that's pissing me off, right? There's some other thing. But really what I was lacking was a solution. And that's what AA gave me, was a solution. It gave me that feeling of without ever having to put a substance in my body. And I'll talk a little bit about how it does that, and the mechanics behind the 12 steps. So the program is like this mechanical process that gives you this very unmechanical result. You pull these 12 levers, and all of a sudden you're catapulted into the fourth dimension, right? So what I learned through the 12 steps, in a nutshell, was, and if I can go through it, kind of synchronous, in a row, but what I discovered is, and there's a part of the 12 steps where you have to take inventory in yourself. And what I learned was that that uncomfortable feeling that I was talking about, the restless, irritable, discontented, was driven by self. It was my own selfishness, my own inconsideration, my own fear, my own lack of trust in myself. And it would drive this insecurity, and it would drive this uncomfortableness, and it would cause me to behave in terrible ways, and then feel guilt and shame and remorse on top of all that, and it would snowball, right? So I learned that I was responsible for the most part in this spiritual sickness. I had been making myself spiritually sick. And it's a humbling pill to have to swallow, that, it wasn't everybody else's fault in the world that I felt this way, or that all of these terrible things had happened to me. But the one thing that was empowering about that was that I now had some control over what I could do about it. Because if I was going to wait for my family to change, my friends to change, the world to change, I'd end up dead and drunk and dead. So through that humbling experience, I realized that I had been living this selfish lifestyle that had been making me uncomfortable. And part of that is going back out into the world and making amends, and that's trying to mend the things that I had caused, the damage that I had caused. And then I also developed a spiritual practice. I had started praying every day, and I didn't know what I was praying to or anything, and I still don't, but there was something very cathartic about starting to pray and asking a higher power to remove those things that I didn't need in myself, the selfishness, the inconsideration, the fear, the resentment, the anger, right? And just asking the universe to take it away from me. And so I'd been doing that for a while, and at night I try and do an inventory as well. So I'd been doing that for several months. And what happened one day is I experienced this spiritual awakening, as we would call it. And I was driving down a Laura Road in my mother's car, and all of a sudden it felt like the car wasn't touching the ground. And it was literally like the blinders came off, and I could see from like the horizon to horizon across the farmers' fields. And all of a sudden I was washed over with peace and serenity, and all of that stuff that had been bothering me my whole life, that weird, uncomfortable feeling that I'd been carrying around since a child, was just washed away. And it was, and in that moment, I kind of knew I kind of knew that I was going to be okay and that everything was going to be okay. And I'd never felt that in my life.
Wow.
And I don't know if that answers your question, but um, so I can talk about why the spiritual solution to this physical allergy, right? So I experienced this spiritual solution, right? I experienced this spiritual remedy. And all of a sudden that mental obsession, this time I'm going to control and enjoy it, right? All of a sudden that disappears because I'm okay right here and right now. I don't feel that I need to be somewhere else, doing something else, with someone else, as someone else. I'm quite content here and now. And if I'm quite content here and now, then I'm not looking for a way to escape that.
Right.
So the miracle of it, the miracle of the program is that the obsession disappears. And when the obsession to use and drink disappears, I don't put the first drink or the first drug in my body. And if I don't put the first drink or the first drug in my body, then I don't trigger that allergy we call craving. And I don't break out into cravings, and I don't go off on a bender or a spree. So it's this spiritual solution that they came up with. I escape my own fear, my own anxiety, I escape the spiritual sickness, and I elevate my spirit to another level, and all of a sudden the other two problems just take care of themselves. So it's this spiritual solution to a mental and a physical problem. And when I learned that in AA, it made a whole lot of sense, because I used to call my girlfriend up and I used to say, "Baby, I'm just going to stop at the pub and have a couple of pints." And I meant that. Like, if you hooked me up to a lie detector test at that point, I was telling the truth. I would go to the pub, I would have a couple of pints, I would trigger the allergy, and then I wouldn't come home till 3, 4 in the morning, usually after hitting the drug dealer's house. So when someone described this allergy to me, it was like, oh my God, this makes a whole lot of sense. I probably am physically allergic to alcohol and drugs in this way. And it explained a lot of things for which I could otherwise not account.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's my brief synopsis of my experience with the 12 steps.
That's awesome, man. That's an amazing story. An amazing story. Did you want to talk about the 12 steps a little bit?
Yeah, I kind of just did. So the main thing I think that the 12 steps came out. The big book was published in 1939. The Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, for anyone who doesn't know, was published in 1939. And before that, there were spiritual remedies for alcoholism, right? But no one had this step one, which was the idea that we were physically allergic to alcohol, that there's a certain sect of the population that when they ingest booze and drugs, they break out into this thing called a craving, and it's not like other people. So that was a big breakthrough with the 12 steps. And really that's the one thing that stops, if you fully understand that, it stops people from having that first one, right? It stops, you might get spiritually sick again, you might start getting resentful and angry and bitter and and all that stuff. But at least okay, I can't pick up that one drink because it's going to trigger this physical allergy, right? And off I'm going to go on the races again. It's a terrible way to stay sober. They call it a dry drunk or a white knuckle sobriety, but it's there for a reason. The other steps are to clear away that spiritual sickness, so that sobriety becomes a sustainable way of life, because it allows us to feel that ease and comfort, without having to put a substance in our body. So yeah, it started out by going to meetings, and there's a lot of there's a lot of stuff in the meetings that's not AA, if you ask me. And the fellowship is not the program of AA, as I was talking about last night. Nowhere in the big book does it say I need to go to an AA meeting. The program of Alcoholics Anonymous is this simple, very simple program that's practiced on a daily basis to keep me elevated from my spiritual sickness, my spiritual baseline. It's to keep me elevated from that so that I don't start obsessing again. And it really is a beautiful program, and it's changed my life. And I really owe everything to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, for sure, and somewhat the fellowship.
That's amazing, man. I wish I knew that about AA when I first quit drinking too. Because I went to a couple of meetings and it was just a bunch of guys sitting around, and they were helpful, but I didn't know about all this stuff. And that's the thing that I guess turned me off was about AA was I got the big book, and I used to read that, and it was just all the God stuff in there, because I was at a point in my life where I wasn't spiritual and I didn't have a spiritual connection to my higher power. And I had some, I grew up going to a Catholic school, and, I wouldn't say I was really religious. I just kind of was in this Catholic school, and, other things that happened in my life. So that word God was kind of an icky kind of word for me, and that, kind of turned me off. But, moving forward to today, I have a total different relationship with that word God and whatever it means to me. So yeah, that was my personal experience. And what you said about the allergy, I have a similar thing, maybe on a different level than you, but when I take that first drink, for me too, I would plan to have one drink or just have a couple of drinks, but it would always turn into 12 drinks, or I would drink until my body physically couldn't let me drink anymore. And that was usually 12 beers and half a bottle of hard liquor or whatever was in the cabinet, plus, whatever drugs I had on me. But yeah, I wish I knew about that, back then, because that makes total sense, because you're sitting there going, how come I can't just drink like a normal person? And that was the hardest thing for me when I first quit drinking. It's like, what's wrong with me? How come I can't just go for dinner and have a glass of wine? How come I can't just, and that was really that when I first quit drinking, that was a really hard thing for me to accept. Like, I'm never going to be able to have a glass of wine at dinner again. I'm never going to be able to have a toast at this time. But, and I think that's important for people to understand that too. If they have anyone in their life that has that addiction and has that allergy, and they don't really know why, like for me, I would always grab a beer out of the fridge, but I would grab 3 beers out of the fridge. I'd have one in my hand and 2 on deck. And then when I cracked the second one, I would grab another one. So I always had 2 in front of me. And, and kind of similar to you too, like when I had a couple of those, when I had a couple of beers in me, I felt fantastic. And I felt great, and it kind of took that uncomfortable feeling away.
So can you relate to the spiritual sickness, like the feeling of awkwardness and that uncomfortableness in your own body as a young person before you even started using drugs or alcohol?
Yeah, a little bit. I was trying to reflect on that a little bit when you were talking about it, and a little bit. Yes, I think I need to reflect on that a little bit more, but yeah, I always felt, and even still do, I always felt like different, or felt like an outsider, or felt like, something was different about me. And, drinking made me feel good too. And it also, for me, was an escape. I was a really shy person too. So I'd use drugs and alcohol as a way to talk to girls at parties, like, oh, this is great. And I remember the first time I ever did cocaine, I wouldn't stop talking. And I remember thinking, oh, this is great. I can use this to talk to girls at the bar. And that's the stupidest thing ever. who wants to, go talk to a girl and you're all hopped up on this stuff. And then, what happens if you take her home and then, the next day you gotta talk to her again and you're a totally different person. But, yeah, that's crazy, man. That's crazy. I wish I would have gotten in touch with you, I guess I first quit drinking about 10, 12 years ago. I've been sober for 6 years now. So I think we weren't really in touch at that time. So we were kind of both going through it in our own ways. But it's crazy to reconnect after all these years and hear your full story, man. It's really, really inspiring.
It's that description that I just gave of alcoholism or addiction. We call it a threefold illness: the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. That description, even in the rooms of the recovery rooms, is hard to find, and that's what I mean. Like our fellowship has been watered down. It's hard to find that message in the rooms of recovery now, which is a real shame. Because as soon as I heard that, it was like, oh my God, that makes total sense. And there's probably people listening to this who cannot relate to that at all. But anyone who can really relate to that feeling of, the spiritual sickness that I was talking about, the physical allergy, and the mental obsession, anyone who can really relate to that, it's like, oh my God, I have this thing, right? And if I have this thing, there's a line in the book that says, we needed to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholic. And that's basically what it is. Yes, I obsess when it's not in my body. When it is in my body, I'm unable to control how much I use. And when I'm not drinking, I'm a restless, irritable mess, right? If I could say yes to all three of those things, then the progression is probably going to get to a point that's going to kill me. And if I can understand that, if I can fully swallow and comprehend that, then I need to do something. So that's step one. I fully concede, yes, yes, yes. And then the other 11 steps are to remedy that. And that's really what pushes. If you understand, holy cow, I have this thing and it's probably going to kill me. That's kind of what pushes us through the next 11 steps is this feeling of, I'm screwed. I'm screwed if I don't do something. And there's this beautiful thing that happens. And I almost like to think of my addiction as a superpower now, because I've been gifted this program that allows me to live through all kinds of situations and stay on a relatively even keel. And it's something that a lot of people don't have. I forget what I was going to say. But I really do feel grateful that I'm an alcoholic now, because I've been gifted this amazing program. And it works. It's my solution to everything now. It's not just my solution to drinking and using.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's a great way of looking at it. Often the hard things that we go through in life shape us into the person that we are. So, if you never went through all that stuff, you wouldn't be the person you are today, and you wouldn't be helping people in the way that you're helping today. So I love that you're looking at it that way as your gift. And, I have that same sort of thing. When I quit drinking, I continued smoking pot for a long time because I use it as a way to say, okay, at least I'm not drinking. I'm just getting stoned. It's not a big deal. But I had that same thing where I couldn't stop smoking it. Like I couldn't smoke pot like a normal person. People think like, oh, it's just pot. It's not even a drug. Like it's nothing, right? And I feel stupid for saying it sometimes. But for me, I quit. It took me 2 years to finally quit, and I've been having a really hard time with it for the past couple of years too. And I quit for one time last year. I quit for 6 months, and I was doing great. And then something happened. You get the little voice in your head that tells you to go do it. And I had one puff, And within a couple of days, I was smoking from the time I woke up till the time I went to bed. I was smoking in the morning. I was smoking before work. I was smoking at work. And like, I had a pretty big job. Like I was executive chef at like a fancy place, and like no one knew I was doing this, and I was just hiding it. And I would look at myself and I'd say like, what the hell am I doing? And I had the awareness because I was practicing meditation. I had the awareness to notice that this was controlling my life, and it was the only thing that I would think about. And every time had a chance, say my kids would go to school, my wife would take the dog for a walk. I have a chance where I'm alone for 5 minutes, and that's what I'm doing. And it just like, now it kind of makes sense, because I used to think like, what the hell is wrong with me? And I had almost had the same sort of thing like with food too, like with the addiction that I had with sugar and candy and stuff.
Me
It's
too,
like
yeah,
I just
me too.
can't stop. And then you put the sugar and candy addiction together with the smoking pot, and you have the munchies, and it's like I'm waking up in the middle of the night and just like going crazy eating stuff.
Yeah, I'm laughing about it now, but it's horrible. It can ruin people's lives, right? And it definitely quashes their potential. I can definitely relate to that. Any substance that alters my mood, I seem to have that physical allergy I was talking about.
Mhm.
Whether it's cookies, cocaine, or cannabis. I have the physical allergy. Um, so I'm really glad that I'm aware of it now, because it's such a subtle thing, and if you're not conscious of it, you don't really realize that I'm breaking out into this craving, right? Um, but now, like, one of the greatest things that the 12 steps gave me was an awareness, not only an awareness of my own selfishness and self-centeredness and self-seeking, but this awareness of my um, this physical allergy that I have, and I seem to have it with a lot of things. So, and I think a lot of addicts can attest to that. And that's oftentimes like, you know, people say, okay, I'm going to get off the booze and I'm just going to smoke weed, right? And what happens is all of a sudden they just substitute. All of a sudden they're smoking weed all the time because they're not treating the problem. The problem is the spiritual disease, this restless, irritable, and discontentedness. Um, so you're treating it with another substance, and it seems the only way to really get, and that's what the 12 steps does. It gets to the root of the problem, which is this restless, irritable, and discontentedness. And once you treat that, you don't feel like using any. Like I've absolutely no desire, and I haven't had any desire for many, many, many years to drink or to use drugs. It's just gone because I'm pretty content with where I am now in my life, and I'm pretty content, with who I am for the most. Like it changes a bit, but I can't say it's 100% of the time. But it's not enough to send me back out looking for a substance to change the way I feel.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. Same with me. Like I said, I've been over 6 years sober now, and I don't have any sort of cravings or anything. The odd thing will happen, and I'll get just a jolt of electricity will go through my body, and I'll feel it like in my blood, just the urge to drink for a split second. Or, when I was a chef working in the kitchen, I sometimes had to taste things with alcohol in them. And I, would taste a sauce with a little bit of alcohol in it, and I wouldn't even wouldn't even swallow it. Even just tasting it, touching it to my tongue, I could feel it in my whole body.
Yeah, I
And
can relate to that.
just like crazy. And my path is a lot different than yours, because I didn't go through the AA and the 12 steps. But the other thing I wanted to say was, over the last 12 years of quitting drinking, I had a few times where I sort of fell off the wagon and started drinking again and got back into it. One time I thought I could have a glass of wine, or I tried to have a glass of wine with my wife for her birthday, and we had a glass of sparkling wine or whatever, and then that led to, within a couple of days, I'm sneaking alcohol out of the cupboard and getting drunk at home by myself and drinking all the alcohol in the cupboard. To a couple weeks later, I just started a new job, and I'm at the Christmas party at the president's house, and I'm blackout drunk with my wife and my daughter, who was just born and a couple months old. And but the point I'm trying to make is, I don't know if you ever like fell off the wagon or experienced those setbacks, but for me, those setbacks, like, yeah, it really sucks. Like, you're sober for 3 years and then you screw up and you're drinking again for a month. But for me, that really helped me stay on track. Whereas now, you look at those times, and those times, at the time, I felt like a piece of shit and I felt like a failure, but it was those times that actually made me stronger and actually like helped me overcome things in the future. So, I'm almost grateful for those times now, because, if I ever have a moment where I'm craving having a drink, I just think back to the last time where I was drinking and how I felt and all that stuff. And I remember I was working with a guy. So when my twins were born, that summer when my twins were born, I started drinking for 4 months, and someone I worked with passed away, and she was a big like party girl, and she passed away suddenly overnight, and it was right before Mother's Day, and we found out in the morning. We were about to do a big brunch for 400 people, and we found out, and then I was working at a private club at that time, and we had a celebration of life for her. So I thought, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to have a glass of wine for her. And I had that glass of wine, and then the next thing I know, I was in my car driving to the liquor store. Then next thing I know, I'm drinking 12 beers a day. And I did that for 4 months, and I knew I was fucked up, and I knew that I shouldn't be doing it, but I just couldn't stop, and I just kept doing it. And I remember I told myself that, okay, if someone tells me to stop, then I need to stop. And I kind of put it in someone else's hand. Like, if my wife, tells me to stop drinking, then I got to stop drinking. I remember one morning she said to me, I woke up and she said, Jay, like, what the fuck? How many beers did you drink last night? And, I had a big pile of empties downstairs, and I'd always think that she didn't notice. But I remember that day, that was a morning, it was September 1st, like 6.5 years ago. And then I just said, yeah, I need to stop again. And that's when I stopped. And I had a guy I worked with was in recovery, and he had a really, really, really bad story. He's doing really well now. He just got reconnected with his family and his kids and stuff. But I remember he said something to me once. He said, if you keep drinking, you're going to have to make a choice between the alcohol or your family. And I think that was the biggest thing that kind of did it for me, and really stuck with me. So that I kind of use that time as I use that time that I had now and that's what really kind of keeps me sober. And I really remember that. And I think, that's true. If it comes down to a choice between the alcohol or the family, I'm going to choose my family. But, I know some people that unfortunately, aren't able to make that choice, and they'd rather choose the alcohol over their family. And that's probably why, because it had such a strong, hold on them, and they can't stop. So I don't know where I'm going with that. I think I'm more just kind of sharing my own story there.
So in the big book, and that's really what I'm familiar with, it describes 3 types of drinkers. It describes a type of drinker that can take it or leave it alone, and this is the type of person that has half a glass of wine at Christmas, and they don't touch it again till Easter.
Mm-hmm.
These people don't care whether they have alcohol in their lives or not. And then there's this certain type of hard drinker, and they can look like me, they can smell like me, they can act like me, but they're not me. And the big difference is, given sufficient reason, falling in love, warning of a partner or a doctor, threat of losing something, your family, your job, the threat of some sort of consequence or some sort of consequence, they can stop or they can moderate. And and it's tricky because, they can drink the quantities that I did, they can drink in the frequency that I did, but at some point, given sufficient force, they can shut it down on their own. Whereas I needed not only to learn that I had this physical allergy and that I was spiritually sick, but I needed to seek something that's not in the third dimension to remedy this problem. Um, so it's confusing for the real deal. Like I'm the real deal alcoholic. It's confusing for people like me who end up in rehab, and there's all these people saying like, I'm going to stop because of my family, and then they go off and they stop because of their family, and they do, and their life gets better and everything's fantastic, right? And then I'm like, why can't I do that? Like, there's something really wrong with me. Um, and it's the severity is much worse. Like,
Right.
the more consequences I suffer, the more I want to drink. And that's why you get crackhead mothers and stuff that they honestly do love their children, but they just cannot stop. Like, the spiritual sickness is so strong in them, and the physical allergy is so strong in them that they can't escape it. Um, so there's like the problem drinker, and then there's the real deal addict. So it's, I don't know, it might help for someone to hear that. Like, if you're the real deal alcoholic, maybe the consequences won't be enough, and you need to seek something outside yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And luckily for me, I remember when I first quit drinking, and I thought, okay, I'm sober now. My life should be better. I should feel good. I remember I looked in the mirror. I looked in the mirror one day, and I realized, like, I'm not happy. I looked around, and I'm like, I'm supposed to be happy. I have all this stuff. I have a great partner.
Mm-hmm.
I just bought a new house. I have all the things in my life that I thought were supposed to make me happy. I just bought a pool table. I just bought a new guitar. All these things, but I wasn't happy. And that's when I really kind of went inside, and I realized something was missing inside, and I didn't love myself. And that's when I got help. In a way, I talked to my doctor, and I got a referral to the outpatient mental health clinic at the St. Catherine's Hospital. And I went and signed up for some group therapy classes. One of them was CBT level 1. The other group was called the Be Your Best Self group. And the other group was a mindfulness meditation group. And my wife used to tell me all the time, oh, you should meditate. It will help you with your stress and all this stuff. But I wasn't really into it. But I think meditation is what actually, saved my life. And then over time, that's how I developed a sort of a spiritual practice and a connection to myself and a connection to my higher power. To have a spiritual awakening just a few years ago, similar to yourself. I had like an aha sort of moment, and that's when I realized I really wanted to follow my intuition and give up doing the drugs and all that sort of stuff. So although my path was a lot different than yours, it's kind of just similar to yours in some ways, but also fairly different. So I'm grateful that I now have that spiritual, connection to my higher power or God or universe or source or whatever you want to call it. And I meditate every day, and I pray every day, and I'm more focused on the inside rather than all the things on the outside, which I was chasing to make me happy, but it didn't actually do what I was told it was supposed to do, or what I believed it was supposed to do.
I like to look at it this way, that all of our ancestors, like, it's only in the past 200 years or so, the Industrial Revolution, that we've really became these physical, really started believing in the physicalness of life. All of our ancestors before that would have looked to the heavens for solutions, right? And it really is an innate part of our brain to want something greater than ourselves, right? And I think our society these days, we are so focused on the material, that we deny that part of ourselves that's seeking something outside of ourselves,
Right.
or which may be very well inside ourselves. But I think as soon as we start denying ourselves spirituality, we start to get sick because we require it. We're spiritual beings. All of our ancestors
Exactly.
have been spiritual
Yeah.
beings. Yeah. And it starts to manifest in all kinds of weird behaviors. If we don't have spirituality, we start to find it in food, in sex, in gambling, in drugs, in TV, and video games. Something to fill that spiritual hole. But we're
Exactly.
trying to shove square pegs in round holes, right? And it doesn't work. We just
Exactly.
get left more and more. We feel more and more empty the more we try and fill it with things that don't fit that hole.
Exactly, brother. Well, Jeff, that was great, man. We're coming to the end of our time here. I almost think that we should have you back on the show to do a part 2. And if you'd be open to that, we can maybe talk about that. But
Yeah, for sure. There's more I could talk about. Yeah.
yeah, man. Yeah, but before we wrap things up, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners? Is there anything that we didn't cover today that you'd like to add?
I would I'm not here to promote AA, nor am I supposed to as a member of the fellowship. They say it's attraction rather than promotion. But if someone's turned their nose up at it, maybe give it a second thought. There is something there. It's worked for more addicts than anything else. It's not even 100 years old. So it is a tool that we have in the modern day that alcoholics for thousands of years never had access to. What's the worst that can happen is what I like to say,
Yeah, amazing. That's a great point. Great point, brother. And where can people find you if they'd like to connect with you, Jeff?
So you can shoot me an email. I'm not, I don't have social media or anything. My email is jeffmccomb86@gmail.com. JEFFMCCOMB 86@gmail.com.
86. Does that have anything to do with the 86 kitchen term at all, or is that unrelated?
It's unrelated. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome, brother. Jeff, that was so great, man. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.
It's awesome, man.
Hopefully I've said something that helps someone.
Awesome. Well, you helped me. You helped me a lot too. I'm sure that this episode is going to help a lot of people out there, brother.
I hope so.
Awesome, man. And for everyone listening, we'll include Jeff's information in the show notes below. Jeff, we'll get your email address. You want to stick around, Jeff, and I can just get your email address off you. We can add that to the show notes. And as always, if you'd like to connect with me, you can follow me on Instagram at transformative_pathways and also on TikTok at Jason_Dobie. You can also find my link tree in the show notes below, where you'll have access to all my social media, my email list, and my private community. And if you're ready to take this work even deeper, I invite you to check out the Journey Within, my 12-week coaching program designed to help you break free from stress, self-doubt, and feeling stuck so you can live life with more confidence, clarity, and purpose. Click the link below or go to jasondobie.com for more details. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love it if you could subscribe, and follow us on your favorite listening platforms. And if you'd like to support the show, we'd be so grateful if you could take a moment to leave a review. It would mean so much to us and also help the show reach more listeners. And again, thank you so much for being with us today. We look forward to connecting with you again next time.
This has been the Transformative Pathways Podcast with your host, Jason Dobie. Tune in each week for more insights, inspiring stories, and transformative journeys. Until then, keep exploring the path to keep your best self. Saturdays, 3 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network, powered by B2 Studios.